Okay, it's Sunday, which means against my better judgment, it's time to go to Reddit and see what we can find in this hive of scum and villainy. So I've been to the Overwatch University subreddit ahead of time and just scraped all the questions off the first couple pages, and we're going to answer them now, while just some footage of Dragon Ball FighterZ plays in the background, because it's a better game than Overwatch. And if you're wondering which side I'm on, just look for whichever side started with Android 21. We'll be very blue, also. So first off, is Bridgette viable to play? And the answer is yes, but given the recent nerf, I would recommend only really playing Bridgette to counterpick certain teams, which is basically very dive or very flank heavy teams, pretty much, because then having Bridgette's crowd control is very helpful, but other than that, there's not really a lot of point to picking Bridgette, dude. She's really not as good anymore. She gets to output more healing overall, so that's nice, but if we're talking about just raw healing, that's never really been all that important for the supports, to be honest with you, because if it was that important, Moira'd be the best support hands down, but she's not, because she's got no utility. So it's great that Bridgette gets to output more healing, but tragically, that's not as important as her just being able to fuck a flanker or diver, basically. And so, you know, if there are flankers and divers, she can still do it. Like, she's still helpful versus people like Reaper, Genji, and all that, but outside of those situations, I don't think there's really any point to picking her anymore. Unless you're like, maybe you're just like real into Bridgette, in which case, I understand, but you have a lot of trouble playing Bridgette against, like, a bunker comp, which are really popular right now, and only look like they might get stronger once people get used to playing Sigma as well, because, oh boy, is playing Sigma with Orisa like the safest bastion you'll ever see in your entire life. So, there you go. The answer is yes, but I'd only use her as a counter pick, basically, at this point. So next up is, how do placement matches work? And people get, like, really upset over placement matches because they feel like they're gonna get some kind of fresh start, and they're gonna suddenly jump, like, 3 SR brackets or something right when the season starts, and it's not really ever gonna happen. Placements are basically just, like, slightly more weighted regular games, basically. Like, pretty much just take whatever you've ended the last season with and add, like, plus minus 50 for each game you win or lose, basically. And that's pretty much how it goes. Like, it's not any kind of dramatic difference. There just seem to be, like, slightly more weighted than usual. So even if you win all 5, you're, like, probably only gonna be, like, 200 SR, maybe, above where you were previously. Maybe not even that, right? Like, placement matches are not as overpowered in terms of SR gains as people think they're gonna be. You're gonna be within pretty close range of where you ended the previous season at. And if you didn't have any previous season queued up, then just assume it's gonna be, like, low gold to high gold, depending on how much you crush it, pretty much. Because that seems like roughly where people end up if they didn't have any previous ones. It seems to just go for, like, middle of the pack for the most part, which is around gold platinum. High gold platinum is, like, the middle of the bell curve, weirdly enough. So there you go, that's how placement works. They're not very good. They're just a little bit better than most games. So next up is, how much does not speaking in competitive really impact your win rate? And the answer is not very much, because I've never spoken to another human being in my entire life in Overwatch, except just to show them that I really am an asshole, basically. Oh, join voice chat. I'm a toxic asshole. I don't care. Join anyway. And then within 5 minutes, they're like, you are toxic. I told you. What did you expect, dude? Anyway. So I got to Masters by never talking to another person in my entire life. So obviously it doesn't matter that much, at least for most people it isn't going to. I'm currently in the process of leveling a Smurf account so that I can try and get to Grandmasters on that. So I'll report back to you if I manage to get to Grandmasters, also never speaking to another human being. I'm optimistic with my chances. The only way that me not talking to people has ever lost me games has been because people just get tilted about it, but my stance on that is, like, people are gonna get tilted regardless. Like, if someone's gonna get tilted, they're probably just gonna get tilted over something else. I was playing a game the other day, and it was on Paris, and I've got my profile set to just default private, right? So, because, like, I don't care about showing other people my fucking win ratios, because who gives a fuck, right? Like, my stats are for my ego, not yours, so I don't really care if you see them. But this one guy who was playing Orisa got really fucking mad that I had a private profile, and not because he was, like, calling me a pussy or anything like that, which is, like, what you'd normally expect. He was very adamant that me having my profile set to private was actually the reason I was in ELO hell, which is how he described it. I was in ELO hell because of my private profile, because my profile being private was apparently impacting my team's performance. And the reason given for that was they can't see my time played on heroes, which is apparently the linchpin of the whole team operation, whether or not you can read how many hours I have on a hero. It was a very peculiar exchange that I had. I've had exchanges like that, but they just call me a pussy instead. What are you hiding, bitch? I'm like, I just don't give a fuck, dude. It's the default setting. I don't give a shit if you can read my profile. Why do you care that much? So, you know, I've had that. I've never had someone go like, no, that's the reason you're in ELO hell. And it was very perplexing to me. It was a very perplexing exchange. But the moral of that story is, like, if people are gonna get tilted, they're gonna get tilted over, like, fucking anything. It's that argument that, like, if people are gonna be assholes, they're just gonna be assholes, you know? Like, doesn't matter. We'll take the scoreboard out of the games, because then people can't shit-talk other people on their performance and stats-wise. What if we just use the medals to talk shit instead? Haha, I've found it. So, there you go. The answer is not very. You can at least get to Masters not talking to another person. I'll let you know if you can get to Grandmasters. We'll see. So, next up is, why don't pro players fight back when being staggered? And this was a question related to Baby D.Va specifically, because a person had just seen this happen in an Overwatch League game where the D.Va player stood there and just, like, waited to die, didn't fight back for a really long time. And there's really just, like, no reason for the person to fight back in the pros setting, because here's the thing, like, you'll never kill someone as Baby D.Va, right? Because the enemy team's paying attention, right? So you'll never kill anyone, and you gaining ult charge as Baby D.Va is only gaining you ult charge on Call Mech, which is not particularly important if you're going to die anyway, whereas the other team will be, you fighting back will give the enemy team, their healers, more ult charge, because they'll get to heal the damage you did. They might already have their ultimates, but why even bother when you know you're gonna die, and you're not gonna gain anything, because Call Mech ult charge doesn't convert into self-destruct ult charge, right? So that's the reason they don't fight back in the pro games, as Baby D.Va specifically. It kinda doesn't really matter in general, because, like, when you're getting staggered, the best thing you can do is pretty much always just walk into the enemy team to die, and, like, if you have your ult charged as any other hero, there's no reason to fight back for the exact same reason. The damage you're doing isn't going to convert into anything, and you're just going to give their healers ult charge. So it's kind of that way for, like, everyone. It's just Baby D.Va specifically also has the other issue where she's not going to get ult charge because she's building Call Mech, you know. So that's why there's just kind of not a whole lot of point to doing it, really. So there you go, very simple answer. Next up is Gold Tank player returning to the game after a long break. How many picks should I really learn? So, and this person also asked if they should, like, focus on main tanks or off tanks. I think you should focus on one or the other, like, whichever one you personally prefer. Well, I personally prefer the main tanks, so they're the ones I just invest more time in. And right now I'm playing a lot of Sigma, because Sigma's really fun, basically. And he seems pretty good. Like, I've been having a good time as Sigma. His ult, tragically, isn't as good as it seems like it should be. It's a little too easily countered to quite get the same impact as a lot of other big AoE ultimates, but it's still nice, and sometimes it's pretty sick, you know. Anyway, so, yeah, I think you should focus on, like, main tank or off tank, whichever you prefer. I think that's also true for healers. You should focus on whichever one you prefer. And, realistically, with role queue now in the game, I think it's reasonable to expect somebody to be able to play half of the tanks and half of the healers, if they play healers instead. It is not reasonable to expect someone to be able to play half of the DPS category. That's too many DPS. But I do think it's reasonable to ask someone to be able to play, like, half of their main role, basically. And then you should theoretically be better at whichever side of it you've focused on, right? But, like, sometimes you're going to be off-tank and sometimes you're going to be main tank, regardless of which one you prefer, so you should still be able to play people in both category. But, and same with healers as well, but I think about half is a reasonable expectation. Like, maybe a little bit more than that, even. Maybe more closer to, like, maybe, like, 2/3, something like that. You know, either half or most, basically, of the category. Because now you can actually, like, focus on a role much more easily, now that you can just guarantee you're going to be able to play that role, right? And not be in, like, some kind of ridiculous situation. Because previously, like, you wouldn't have to really compete to play against many other tank players, right? But you might be playing, like, solo tank, so you have to play main tank then, don't you? Regardless of if you're playing off tank. Now we can at least guarantee that you're going to get a reasonable-ish team composition. So you just get to practice these things more, so you should be able to play a lot of them, basically. DPS, it's, like, different because you have... The DPS category is so much larger than the tank or healers category. They also don't really cleanly divide into, like, main DPS and off DPS, right? You can pretty much... The distinction for DPS is pretty much, like, utility DPS and damage output DPS. For example, Widow and Hanzo. Widow would be the damage DPS, and Hanzo would be the utility DPS. Stuff like that. So, you know, DPS, I think it's more reasonable to say, like, probably, like, 25%, 33% of the role, something more like that. There's just so many more of them that it's not... You can't go, like, oh, you should be able to play every DPS. Like, that's ridiculous. There are people who are like, you should be able to play every tank and every healer. I don't think that's realistic, because there's no way that you personally are going to have a playstyle that jives with every single tank and healer, right? Like, it's not realistic to expect people to be that way. Like, I can play most of the tanks, right? But I am extremely uncomfortable playing Zarya. I'm very bad at her. So I try to avoid playing Zarya, right? Like, you're never gonna... Well, I suppose you could be. You're extremely unlikely to be a person that can play every tank and every healer to the same level. I think especially in the healer category, where there's more difference between those heroes, right? Like, Ana is, like, 1,000 miles away from Lucio in terms of gameplay, right? So I don't think it's realistic to expect that, though some people are like, oh, you should be able to play fucking everyone in your role, dude. Not sensible. Not a sensible request to make of people. So there you go. just aim for like half of the category, I think, and then focus on whichever side of it you prefer, main tank, off tank, main healer, off healer. Like, focus on that one, be able to play people in the other category as well, because it's inevitable that you're going to have to play the other one eventually. If you play main tank or main healer, you're pretty unlikely to be forced into playing off tank or off healer, but people are usually more willing to play those ones, but you never know. Sometimes it's still gonna happen, right? So there you go. That's the answer there. Next up is good DPS to learn for 222. This is along very similar lines to the last one. There weren't so many, like, good questions this week, to be honest with you. There were, like, 3 in a row that were, like, is X hero viable? I picked Bridgette because she is one that just went through a few changes, right? But, like, there was another one that was, like, is Orisa viable? Yeah. Yeah, she is, actually. And what was the other one? It was one of the supports. I think it was Zenyatta. They were like, is Zenyatta viable? Like, yeah. Zenyatta's also viable. You know. Those were not really worth taking, you know. Like, yeah, turns out those are pretty good heroes. Anyway, good DPS to learn for 222. So you want to be relatively flexible, because here's the thing, with the way that the 222 works, DPS are basically the only ones that really get to do much counter-picking. So you want to be relatively well-rounded in terms of which DPS you can play, seeing as you're the one that's largely going to be doing the counter-picking. You're not going to be doing all of the counter-picking, because, you know, tanks and healers get some options, you know, like if there's a Pharah that's wrecking you, you can change to things like Diva, right? Like, sure. But for the most part, it's the DPS doing the counter-picking. So if we're trying to be pretty flexible, right, we pretty much want to try and play, like, a few different categories of DPS, but, you know, you might not be able to play, like, flankers comfortably or whatever. So ideally we go, like, mid-range, like, consistent DPS, a flanker, and then, like, a utility DPS, and then a few of each of those, right, given we can now specialize in a role much more easily. So, like, a consistent DPS is someone like Soldier, McCree, Ashe, people that just out Junkrat, people that just put out, like, a very consistent amount of DPS. Utility, also, McCree also gets to double dip and be utility, as well as consistent damage dealer, so that's nice. Flanker is pretty self-explanatory. And then utility is someone like Mei, or Symmetra, you know, someone that they don't necessarily output a lot of damage. Sombra, I think you could also categorize as utility and flanker. They're people that are not really, like, damage dealers, but they bring some kind of utility, right? Like, Mei brings a lot of crowd control and area denial. Same with Symmetra, she brings a lot of area denial, not so much crowd control. And she brings utility in terms of the teleporter, which is now pretty sick that it lasts forever, and photon barrier, so you want to be able to play, like, a few of each of these categories, basically. So, and, you know, maybe you can't play flankers, or you don't like the flankers, whatever, fair enough. That's fine, but these are, like, the deviations, and we want to be able to play a few from each category, ideally. But if you can't, you just fucking can't play flankers, you can't play, like, hit scan DPS, don't worry about it, dude. Like, that's not the end of the world. Something ideal, I think, would look like McCree, Hanzo, Mei. Let me think about that a little bit more. McCree, Hanzo, Mei, Soldier, Ashe, one of those two, something along there. Genji, Sombra, you know, these kinds of heroes, like a mix thereof, basically. I'm not saying you should be able to play, like, all of these heroes specifically, but it's, like, some combination of, like, those sorts of heroes. I think, like, 2 of each category, ideally, but if one of them just doesn't mesh with you for one reason or another, like, whatever, dude. Like, that's fine. But, you know, you basically want to try and be pretty versatile. I think, like, McCree and May are, like, two very important ones right now. I would say that you should try and learn those two specifically. Because they alone cover most of your bases, right? Like, there are very few situations in which May and McCree are bad. You can pretty much put them in anywhere, and it's fine. Whereas someone like Symmetra is a little bit more specialty, right? Like, you're not going out there just picking Symmetra whenever the fuck, right? So she's more of like something you have in your pocket for the right situations. Whereas McCree and May, you can play like pretty much whenever the fuck, dude. Is there anyone else that I would say is like really necessary? I would encourage Hanzo fairly highly, I think, but I wouldn't say he was necessary. Hanzo's just one of those heroes where fits in a lot of situations, pretty much. He's a pretty well-rounded hero. Also is one of those heroes that gets to, like, really tilt the enemy team just by being there, so that's a benefit. Same with May, to be honest, but I think at this point people are getting Stockholm Syndromed into May because she's fucking everywhere, isn't she? People wish May was fucking everywhere, literally. You disgusting people, Jesus Christ, but she is figuratively fucking everywhere. By the way, Janemba was very disappointing. I'm playing Janemba right here. I'm very upset. He's a very bad anchor, which is what I really wanted someone to be, because I don't like any of the good anchors. It's okay, I can still hold out for Gogeta and Broly. Movie Broly. We've already got regular Broly. They're both movie Broly, aren't they? What am I talking about? Canon movie Broly and non-canon movie Broly. Anyway, we're talking about Overwatch right now. So, you know, try and get, basically the moral of the story is try and get 2 of, like, each category. Don't worry too much if you can't play one category. Whatever, that just means you get to round out the other categories more, right? Because if you, like, can't play flankers, then you can just add, like, another consistent DPS or another utility in there as well, right? Like, you can just be more well-rounded than the other ones if you decide to forego one of these categories for the other. So there you go. I would highly encourage you to be able to learn McCree and May because they're very good right now. And then I'd encourage Hanzo as well, but not to the same level as the others. So there you go. So next up, and this is actually the last question for this week. Didn't have that many questions, unfortunately. You know, I might round it out by talking about Sigma, depending how long this takes. So the last question is having 2 main healers too much healing? And the answer is no, basically. One of the best combinations of healers right now is Anna and Bridgette, or not Anna and Bridgette, Anna and Batista, the other B. Because they just work really well together, dude, and they both have a fuck ton of utility, and then they both get to output, like, a lot of healing at the same time, so they end up being really good together, and they're both main healers, so, you know, God, I played this guy a lot. Oh, Dr. Chungus, let's watch Dr. Chungus. So, like, no, you don't need, like, 2 main healers is fine. The problem with 2 main healers, depending on the combination you have, because if you have Anna and Batista, or Batista in there specifically, this point isn't going to matter so much, but the thing is with not having an off healer, is that you don't get to have a defensive ultimate, which is important for situations like Graviton, Earth Shatter, Gravitic Flux, right? Things like that. Blizzard. Excuse me, Jesus. Not having a defensive ultimate for those is very sad. But if you're playing Batista, it doesn't matter if you don't have a defensive ultimate, because Batista has the immortality field. So he gets to bring the kind of utility that the defensive ultimate has on a main healer, which is part of the reason he's really fucking good. On top of Bunkers just being very good with him as well. So, no, it's not too much healing. If you're running, like, Moira Mercy, then you're gonna run into, or, like, Moira Anna, right? Then this becomes more of an issue for you, because then you don't have, Immortality Field, or Defensive Ultimate. So now, if the enemy team comes at you with a Graviton, right, you're in a significantly weaker spot because you don't have a defensive ult or Immortality Field to use for it, so you might just end up losing that fight. And there's no guarantee you're gonna win the fight if you have those things necessarily, but the thing is with, like, Transcendence, Sound Barrier, and Immortality Field, is they give you a chance to win a fight that you would otherwise have no chance of winning, right? So, even though they're not any guarantee of success, they are a guarantee of you having a chance, at least, which is more than you can say if you don't have those, usually. Because if your whole team gets caught in a Graviton, the enemy team, like, it's not a terrible Graviton. If you don't have, like, a defensive ultimate, then you fucking die, pretty much, right? Like, you just get wrecked, because that's the nature of the ultimate. The Dragon Blade as well, another one that's like that, right? So, that's the problem with having two healers. It's not too much healing, and, like, people like Ana and Batista, like, the more damage they get to contribute to the team overall is always nice, right? So, if there are two main healers, that usually just means that the main healers get to do a little bit more damage as well, which for someone like Ana or Batista can, like, add up because they have, like, decent weapons, right? So, it's nice if they get to add in some damage, which they don't necessarily get to do if they're playing with with an off healer. So, no, it's not too much healing, but bear in mind which combination of healers you have, because it might matter for things like really big team wipe ultimates. And that was the last question. We're a little short. I like to go 30 minutes at least, so we'll talk about Sigma for a little bit, because I've been playing pretty much nothing but him since he came out. And my opinion on Sigma is he's pretty good, dude. I like Sigma a lot. He's very fun. He's difficult to play. Like, he's the most difficult tank to play, I think, out of all of them. Even more than, like, Hammond, really, who I would have said was hardest previously. He does get to do a lot of damage. The main thing with Sigma that I don't like is his left click, just because it's a really fucking weird projectile, basically. But it's a good projectile at the same time. Like, I end up with gold damage as Sigma a lot, so that's very nice. I don't think Gravitic Flux is very good, just because it's so easy to counter, and I hope this is a fucking bug, because this really fucking annoys me that it works this way. If you use Gravitic Flux, and Lucio uses Sound Barrier, he'll use Sound Barrier in the Gravitic Flux. Like, it'll work. You lift Lucio, and he drops the beat. He doesn't touch the ground, he's just held in the air by Gravitic Flux, and he still uses the Sound Barrier. So that really fucking makes me angry. I hope that's a bug, because it's ridiculous to watch Lucio in mid-air use Sound Barrier, and it actually worked. Like, he doesn't have to hit the ground. It's very upsetting. I'm guessing it counts him as, like, I'm guessing it counts the lift as, like, being on the ground or some shit. Like, it's fucked up. I hope that's a bug. But anyway, there's a lot of things that counter Gravitic Flux. Like, it's not as good of, like, a team utility ultimate as, like, Graviton is, just because, like, a lot of people can just get out of it, you know? Like, Moira's just able to fade right out of it. Mei can just use Ice Block. If anybody is low, like, any kind of healing stops them from dying, and then they're probably fine once they land again, unless the team collapses on them. Zarya bubbles counter it. All defensive ultimates counter it. All, especially Sound Barrier. The Lamp counters it. So there's a lot of things that stop Gravitic Flux from really getting anything done. And it's not as good of just, like, a CC ultimate as something like Graviton is, because this is a conversation I had with the chat when we were streaming earlier. It's like, well, can't you say the same thing about Graviton? And with Lamp specifically. The thing is with it compared to Graviton is it doesn't group everybody together nice and conveniently like Graviton does. And this is particularly important for, like, the Lamp, because the thing is with the Lamp is it's very surprisingly good at fucking up Gravitic Flux, because it lifts everybody up, and the idea is that you're trying to hit them while they're in the air so that the slam kills them, right? So you're looking up there, and then Batista throws the lamp below. Now you are looking up there, you have to look down there, and you need your teammates to help you kill the lamp, but Sigma himself cannot kill the lamp before slam goes off. So you need your team to help kill the lamp if it's not just gonna fuck Gravitic Flux, which is a tall ask when they're all looking up there shooting people before they land, right? Whereas Graviton, everybody's grouped together, Batista's gonna put the lamp in the Graviton, basically, so it's easy to just, like, AoE it to death, pretty much. So it's not as good of, like, a CC ultimate as something like Graviton or, Earthshatter is as well, so it ends up being, like, pretty mediocre in a lot of situations. Sometimes it's fucking incredible. Sometimes you fucking slam them and you kill 3 people with the slam and it feels fucking fantastic, and then you don't get the achievement anyway because his achievement tracking's bugged as fuck. But, but his achievements are, like, kill enough people with, Gravitic Flux and block enough damage with, his, I don't know the ability name, his defense matrix that gives him a shield. I've stood in front of a bastion and eaten a whole hog with the shield, and it hasn't worked, and I've killed 3 people with the slam, and it still hasn't worked, so his achievement tracking is apparently a little bit bugged right now, which is nice, but whatever, who cares? So Gravitic Flux ends up not being as good as it seems like it should be in a lot of situations, unfortunately. It's not a bad ultimate, you know, like, it's still better than something like Barrage is, no doubt, but he's one of those examples, like, there are plenty of examples of this where there's a hero that's better than their ultimate, right? Like, Pharah is better than Barrage, right? Sigma is better than Gravitic Flux. Overall, I like Sigma's kit a lot. He's very good at, like, controlling space, I've found. And he's got, like, pretty ridiculous shield uptime. His shield recovers pretty fast, he can deploy it really quickly. People don't focus it down to, like, the same degree as they would with other shields, I've noticed, which might just be, you know, as anecdotal, but I've noticed people less inclined to focus it. And, the boulder is, not the greatest crowd control, because it's really telegraphed, and it's quite a slow projectile. So it's rather difficult to actually hit people with it. It has a lot of build-up, and it gives them a lot of time to see it coming and dodge it, especially if they have any kind of movement ability. Plus, it doesn't go through barriers, which is, like, really upsetting if you're playing against, like, Sigma Orisa, which I think is the best combo of tanks for Sigma. It's just a lot of fucking shields, dude. So, anyway, overall, I think his kit's really cool. The only thing I'm unhappy with, kit-wise, on him, is I wish that if you just tapped right-click, it would put the shield right in front of you, but it doesn't. You have to hold the shield for half a second for it to put it in front of you. So that kind of annoys me. It also feels like there's a weird delay on taking the shield down, because I've been in a lot of situations where I've tried to take it down at, like, 200 health, but then it just breaks anyway, because there's, like, seems like there's a slight delay on taking it down. But that might just also be that I'm bad, so, you know, I'll assume that until shown otherwise, but it feels a little weird taking it down when it's at low health. So, he's pretty good. I like playing him with Orisa, just because it's a lot of, like, zone and shielding. Like, it's a ridiculous amount of shield uptime, basically. Orisa already had, like, really good shield uptime, and Sigma's got really good shield uptime as well. Not as good as Orisa, I would say, but his shield is healthier overall and easier to move, so what he lacks in uptime compared to Orisa, I think he makes up for in terms of utility. But I think she's best played with Sigma, where Sigma's basically playing off-tank. I think for most people, Sigma's going to be a better off-tank, at least until... is this the same game I've started again? I feel like we just saw me do that a second ago. Anyway. Does this miss? Yeah, this was the one we just watched. God damn it. Let's go pick a different one, goddamn. I think for most people, he's going to be better as an off-tank, just because he has a really unorthodox playstyle, basically. So for most people, I think he's going to be a better off-tank, at least until people get used to him. Once people get used to him a little bit more, he might be a better main tank, but I feel like for the majority of people, he'll be better off-tank. Same deal, I think, with Hammond, where I've always said that for most people, Hammond's going to be a better off-tank than main tank, because not only does the Hammond player need to know how to play Hammond, his team needs to know what to do with Hammond. Sigma doesn't have that same kind of thing where his team needs to know what to do necessarily, because, like, if they know how to play with Orisa, they know how to play with Sigma pretty much, but Sigma is way harder to play than Orisa. Some people have said he's really good with Zarya. I've not really enjoyed playing with Zarya as Sigma, particularly. I feel like as far as off-tanks go, he's better with Roadhog or D.Va. I've been playing with a Hammond a lot, just because the dude I play with plays Hammond, like, only Hammond, basically. So I've been playing with Hammond a lot, and that's fine, also, you know. I don't think it's as good as playing Sigma with, like, Orisa or D.Va is, but it's fine, you know, it works out. He's close enough to, like, D.Va, right? And, like, Gravitic Flux plus Minefield is fucking sick, dude. Like, you know, it has to work out, because if they've got any of the things that counter Gravitic Flux, it's gonna, like, fuck it up, but, you know, you can say that about a few old combos as well. But it's pretty sick to lift them up, slam them down on the Minefield, and usually it's like, lift, slam, the mines take an extra second to arm, and then there's this delayed explosion that kills people. It's fucking awesome. So that's very fun. I like Sigma a lot. I do think he's got a pretty steep learning curve, particularly for the tanks. In terms of playstyle, I would say he is the midpoint between Orisa and Reinhardt, where he is, his playstyle is most similar to Orisa, but he is much more aggressive than she is. You can walk forward and, like, fight it out with people a lot more easily. Especially, I mean, there's a few things that go into it. He's got a healthier shield that's easier to move than Orisa, so that already makes him more mobile than she is. His defense matrix will give him personal shields based off how much damage he's absorbed, so, like, even if your shield breaks, you can walk forward and just absorb some bullets and then get a shield and, like, face tank for a little while, basically. The closer you are to the enemy team, the easier it is to hit them with the boulder. And he's got a way more aggressive, like a 1,000 times more aggressive ultimate than Orisa does. So he's more aggressive than Orisa, but he is similar in terms of playstyle to her. He's like the midpoint between Orisa and Reinhardt, basically, is how I would describe him. He's very fun, and I would recommend people to try him out. He does definitely have a learning curve, though, and it definitely takes a while to get used to using his weapon, but once you get used to it, he outputs, like, a lot of damage. I have the gold damage medal as Sigma quite a lot, because once you get good at landing, like, direct hits with it, or, like, near hits most of the time with it, at least, it adds up pretty quickly. It has a low rate of fire overall, but he never has to reload, so if you're, like, consistently hitting them over a very extended period of time, it adds up quite quickly. And if you can, like, hit a 200 HP hero with the boulder and then, like, get 2 direct hits with the balls afterwards, it pretty much kills them. So, you know, I think it might not outright kill them, but it sure does feel like it. It very close to outright kills them every time, at least. So that's, I guess, do a nice little bit of spike damage in there as well. So he's very fun. I would encourage everyone to try him out, at least. And just, you know, it's going to take you a little bit of time to get used to using his gun, unfortunately. But, hey, you know. You could say that about most heroes, I suppose, couldn't you? And, you know, I just started this game, and I realize I've kind of run out of things to say about Sigma other than he's cool, basically. So now we're going to fill space until the game ends, basically. So I was very disappointed with Janemba. We're going to talk about fighters now for like 2 minutes at the end. I was very disappointed with Janemba, because basically I really like playing Vegito and Android 21. Like, they're definitely the two characters I enjoyed playing the most. But it's not really a very good combo of characters, and that encourages me to pick an anchor that is good, the anchor being the third member on your team. And the thing that makes a good anchor is they need, like, basically they need to be good by themselves, and they need to have a good assist. Janemba is fine by himself, but he has an awful assist, so Janemba is tragically not a very good anchor. That's why I play with Vegeta the most, because he is one of those good anchor characters. He's just really fucking boring, though, dude. And that's my problem with all of, like, the good anchors in the game, is they're just really fucking boring, man. Like, Vegeta is boring. Goku is boring. Super Saiyan Goku, that's the only, like, good anchor Goku. He's boring. Tien is boring. Yamcha is boring. These are all very boring characters, so I don't enjoy playing them. But, you know, because I have, like, a not very good point and mid, I'm strongly encouraged to pick one of the good anchors. So, yeah, Janemba disappointed me there. I also, like, Janemba's got, like, a really weird playstyle that doesn't really, work for me. To be fair, Android 21 has a really weird playstyle compared to most characters and fighters as well, but she's fun, and I don't think Janemba is. So, okay, good. The thing I'm really mad about is at EVO they showed us Janemba and Gogeta in the same trailer, and then they only released Janemba. So that was very upsetting. It does look like Gogeta's going to come out soon, because there was this really long... It was like 3 months before we saw anything about Janemba at all, which was really unusual for fighters. Because usually there are, like, magazine leaks. They V-Jump, they show up in every time. But there wasn't anything for Janemba for a really long time. There's stuff in V-Jump for Gogeta only like a week after Janemba came out. So, hey, maybe Gogeta will come out soon. God, I hope Gogeta's good. I'm gonna be so fucking disappointed. And I'm hoping he turns out to be a good anchor, but I kind of don't expect him to be honest with you. I'll be fairly surprised if he is, but I'll do it anyway, because I really like Vegito just as a character, and Gogeta is, like, the same personality-wise. He's just a different style of fusion of the two characters, so he ends up... Gameplay-wise, he'll end up being different, no doubt, but personality-wise, he's the same, so I'll like him for that, if nothing else. And that's why I play Vegito. I just like that Vegito is a cocky asshole, basically. It is also convenient for me that Vegito is fairly easy to play, and all of his combos are really easy to do, because I'm quite bad mechanically at this game. Android 21 is actually pretty hard to play mechanically, but I've played her enough to deal with it, basically. Oh, look at that, we're gonna lose. Sick. Awesome. Fucking Zamasu, dude. I hate that guy. God. Now he's gonna talk for like 20 minutes.
Indeed, by becoming one with Goku, I have taken the sins of humanity and the failure of the gods into myself.
That's one of his shorter ones. He's got one that's almost 3 lines. Fucking Zamasu. And then Vegeta's got a line that's just, I am Super Vegeta. But Zamasu can talk to you for like 10 fucking minutes. Incredible. So there you go. So thank you very much for watching. If you did, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer. If you haven't already, you can join our Discord and ask questions more directly and have a conversation about them, or just shitpost with us. I've started streaming on Twitch Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 8 p.m. EST till midnight EST. There's a link to the channel in the description. And if you managed to make it all the way through the video and somehow still enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe for more content of middling quality in the future. And I hope you found the video helpful.